Merry Christmas Eve, guys. Hope you're all doing well and you're keeping safe. Hope you have found a way to enjoy your Christmas this year. I know it's going to be difficult for pretty much everyone. Now, with this Christmas spirit in mind, I wanted to make a pretty positive video today. And as you can see by the title of this video, this is about the new global event Golden Gun. It's been a pretty terrible year and there's been no shortage of negative videos to make for the Division 2, unfortunately, but thankfully Massive have saved the best till last. So before we bring the positive vibes, subscribe down below to stay up to date with all of the videos, and let's begin. I have to admit, guys, when we found out about this new global event from State of the Game, I thought of two things. Number one, it's another global event that's probably going to punish players and probably offer little power fantasy. And number two, Destiny, is that you? Up until this point in the Division 2's life cycle, there's been only one global event that I kind of enjoyed, and that was Polarity Switch. Aside from that, it's been pretty disappointing with the rest, because they seem to punish the players more than offer a power fantasy that players want. Now you can take a look at Guardians when it first launched, before it was reworked. It was probably the most frustrating experience for me personally. Many times the Guardians would be so far away and hidden behind cover that there was simply no way for me to stop the incoming shotgun rushers except just run away or try to move around towards the Guardian. Sometimes they weren't even there, you couldn't even see them, so that wasn't even a possibility. This meant leaving cover, which on heroic difficulty is pretty much a death sentence unless you're running a shield. The mechanics, they were frustrating and they were very punishing. Even when you did interact with the mechanics and managed to take out the Guardians first, it didn't feel like you were being rewarded for that. This became the blueprint for the majority of global events within the Division 2 until they reworked them. Now, I have not played the reworked global events, mainly because I didn't enjoy the original experience and I just didn't want to go back to them as a result. Guys, I know this is a pretty negative start, but trust me, I'm going to get to the positive stuff now. So, Golden Gun goes live, and I thought I'd check it out because why not? I had low expectations, of course, but wow. I mean, I have to admit, I am really enjoying myself. I'd go as far to say that I'd like this as a permanent toggle in the game. And when this ends, I'm genuinely going to be gutted for it. So what makes this so good for me? Well, there's a couple of things. Number one, the mechanics required to receive the power fantasy are simple and they're easy to interact with. I really like that. Instead of making us kind of do less damage to get the buff, the enemies do more damage. In Guardians, enemies were immune, which is the most frustrating mechanic of all time. But here, with Golden Gun, the enemies have the ability to be really lethal. If they build up their Golden Gun and you're hit, well, you're definitely going to feel it. And I much prefer it being this way around. Plus, in all my time playing this global event, I've only been hit once with a Golden Gun from an NPC. The infrequency of NPCs actually using this against you is, again, really good. Number two, when you get the Golden Gun buff, you basically become a god. The power fantasy here is pretty incredible. Huge increases to every stat for your weapon, rate of fire, stability and accuracy, and everything in between. Your magazine is refilled on taking out NPCs, and the buff refreshes as well. So basically you can keep the buff up indefinitely. If you're using a DPS build, then you're just absolutely going to tear through content. I've seen people using a DPS build with a shield and a chatterbox, just absolutely steamrolling heroic content. It's an amazing power fantasy that makes heroic content seem more like normal content. And I think my favourite thing is watching the classic M1A have absolutely no recoil. It's quite a strange feeling because it basically becomes a laser beam, and I was pretty much, when it first happened to me and I just saw how laser beam the M1A became, I was really surprised. Also, as someone who's been using a skill build for some time now, I love that my skills proc the buff too. Now, I don't believe the skills themselves get buffed. Can you imagine that? Imagine your skills becoming buffed, your skills just becoming Terminator. That would be even more insane. And just maybe some feedback for you guys out there, for the devs. There you go, Massive, take that one. Maybe that's something you could implement. I think that would be cool. But yeah, your skills proc the buff, and because the NPCs generally focus on those skills, if you're using a turret and a drone like me, you're just constantly firing out of cover with this insane buff, raining hell down. It's pretty awesome. For me, it's by far the best I have felt as an agent in the game since launch when this buff is active, and I implore the devs to either make this a main feature, a toggable feature in the game, or extend the global event. On Twitter, everyone is loving it and asking for the same, so please guys, if you are enjoying this one, which I'm going to say the vast majority of people are, head to Twitter and at Massive to keep this global event running, or at the Division 2 to keep this running. And Trick, Dempsey, if you're watching this, very, very good job. Now, I want to kind of light a little fire here towards the end of this video. For those of you who have interacted with this global event and the events from the Division, like Blackout, Assault, Strike, etc., do you think Golden Gun could be the best global event to date? Today, I mean in the Division franchise, so in the last 6 years. Let me know in the comments down below. Now, when I look back on the older global events from the Division, there's some big differences between the two. From the Division, each global event had a global modifier, they had an activity modifier and a group modifier. Now let's take Ambush global event as an example. The global modifier gave agents increased damage when stationary. The activity modifier diminished agents' health when the agents moved, and the group modifier diminished agents' health when close to other teammates. So the global modifier applied across everything in the game when the global event was active, and this always offered a buff to the player. The other two were optional and made the experience most of the time more difficult, usually by making the NPCs more lethal, like in Assault, when enemy damage was increased at longer range. The great thing about these global events was the optional aspect that you had. That's something we've not had in the Division 2 and something we don't have as part of Golden Gun. Now, what made me think that Golden Gun might be at the top of the global event tier list is one thing alone. The power you actually require when getting the buff, or not require, acquire, when getting the buff in Golden Gun surpasses any power fantasy we've had from the Division events. Sure, you'd get a buff and you could do increased damage, especially Outbreak with the headshots, but Golden Gun gives you that god mode, and I don't ever remember having this kind of power in the Division. With that said, the Division events were a lot more fleshed out, there was a lot more mechanics to them, and they really thought about the solo and group experience. Golden Gun doesn't really reward the group experience because, just as Guardians did, when a player gets the Golden Gun buff, it does not spread to the whole team. It should, especially because you will often have encounters where there are no NPCs with the Golden Gun. You don't want team members fighting for the same enemy so that they get the buff, but that is what's happening in the group experience. And secondly, Golden Gun requires you to kill an NPC to get the buff, whereas with most events from the Division, players just got the buff when the event was active, like Assault, for example, where enemies are vulnerable and all agent damage is increased at close range. With all of that in mind, I'd confidently say that Golden Gun is by far the best global event in the Division 2. And whilst I think the power fantasy here is the best it's probably ever been, if my memory serves me well, the Division global events just had more to them, from static buffs to optional extras. If Golden Gun had included some optional features similar to the Division, fleshed out the group experience more, and had increased chance of encountering Golden Gun NPCs, well, it could well be the best global event in the Division franchise. It's just not there yet. That's it for today's video, guys. I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas, and I want to thank you all for your support. Until the next video, guys, Epic out.